Meantime, a federal judge has now blocked the Trump administration from deploying National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon. The judge, who was appointed by President Trump, ruled that the administration violated the Constitution when it sent the guard to Portland last month. She rejected arguments from government lawyers who'd argued that the protest blocked ICE officers from performing their duties. The administration can appeal that decision.
All right, Adam in the building, let's make some noise. Judge Karen Imroot has ruled that Trump's National Guard deployment to Portland was illegal, a devastating blow that dismantles his final legal defense. The ruling leaves no escape route, no pardon, and no procedural tricks left to play. Think about what this means for a moment. We're not talking about a procedural ruling or a minor setback. Judge Imroot has issued a permanent injunction that stops this kind of deployment in its tracks. Trump can't do it again. He can't find a loophole. He can't argue that he was misunderstood or that the law means something different than what the judge says it means. The injunction is permanent, and it's backed by the full authority of the federal judiciary. But here's where things get truly catastrophic for Trump's legal strategy. This ruling doesn't just affect Portland. It strips away the central argument that Trump's legal team has been clinging to like a life raft in stormy seas. For years, they've been making the case that presidential power is essentially unlimited, that Trump could deploy military forces anywhere, anytime, without oversight, that his executive authority was so broad that virtually nothing he did as president could be questioned or prosecuted.
As the president attempts to deploy more National Guard troops into U.S. cities that he deems war zones, a federal judge blocked 2 attempts by the administration to deploy California and Oregon's National Guard into Portland. The White House claims there are riots in the city.
What was unlawful with the Oregon National Guard is unlawful with the California National Guard. The judge's order was not some minor procedural point for the president to work around like my 14-year-old does when he doesn't like my answers.
So as that hearing was unfolding, the Trump administration activated a 3rd state's National Guard. Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued a statement saying he, quote, fully authorized the president to call up 400 members of the Texas National Guard. The plan is to send them to Oregon and also to Chicago, where the situation is growing more tense by the hour. Federal agents threw tear gas at protesters over the weekend.
Judge Imroot looked at that argument and effectively said, no, that's wrong on every conceivable level. The judicial rejection of Trump's core defense theory is what makes this a final collapse rather than just another setback. Because here's the brutal reality that Trump's team is now confronting. If Trump doesn't have unlimited executive authority, then most of his defenses across all his cases don't just weaken, they disappear entirely. This is the moment that legal observers have been waiting for. The turning point that changes everything about how Trump's cases will proceed. The claim of absolute immunity for official acts, the assertion that military deployment doesn't require proper authorization, the argument that executive power exists outside the bounds of federal law, all of these have been systematically dismantled by a judge who clearly had no patience for legal theories that defy the Constitution.
The legal battle continues. This federal judge out of Oregon was actually appointed by President Trump, and she called for an emergency hearing Sunday as, again, this legal clash was continuing, and she granted this expanded temporary restraining order to block any National Guard troops from deploying to Oregon. The administration had tried to send them in to protect an ICE facility, to stand guard outside of an ICE facility in Portland, which has been the scene of a lot of demonstrations. Now, as you noted, the day before, she had blocked Oregon National Guard from deploying and then accused the administration of what she called an end run, or trying to circumvent her earlier order by trying to send troops in from elsewhere, from California. Democratic governors in California and Oregon called this an abuse of power, said that this is a matter for local law enforcement and that the conditions on the ground don't warrant the approach by the administration.
The specific finding about the National Guard deployment is built on meticulous legal analysis. Federal law places strict restrictions on when and how presidents can deploy military forces domestically. These aren't vague guidelines or suggestions, they're clear legal requirements that Trump apparently violated in multiple ways. He deployed forces without proper authorization, used them in ways that exceeded his authority, and the judge found that every aspect of this deployment was conducted illegally. What makes this particularly devastating for Trump is that the finding has implications far beyond Portland. If Trump illegally used military force there, then other deployments in other cities, other uses of federal forces in other situations, all become potentially illegal under the same legal reasoning. This is a domino effect that threatens to topple every argument Trump's team has made about executive authority. The permanent injunction aspect of this ruling cannot be overstated. Trump is now legally bound not to repeat this conduct. He can't deploy forces to Portland or similar situations without following proper legal procedures.
Victor, what this decision is doing is basically pressing pause on the deployment of the National Guard to Oregon. The question that the judge, Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, I should add, had to answer was this an overreach by the federal government to federalize the National Guard? In the complaint, both the state of Oregon and the city of Portland had called this deployment unlawful and unwarranted, but there were three basic pillars that her decision was based on. One of them is Section 12406 of the U.S. Code. It says basically that the president exceeded his authority here and that he did not prove that he was, quote, unable with regular forces to execute the laws there. A second one is the concept of rebellion. The standard for rebellion here was not met. She said that the protests were recently small and mostly peaceful. There were some sporadic incidents, but it wasn't an organized and armed rebellion as the federal government was using to justify this deployment.
This isn't a suggestion or a request. It's a court order with serious consequences attached. Violating it would mean contempt of court, potentially resulting in sanctions and even arrest. Legal experts are already calling this a historic turning point. They're saying it represents something we haven't seen in modern American history. A judicial determination that presidential conduct was illegal in a way that strips away immunity defenses and establishes clear limits on executive power. The precedent this sets will affect not just Trump's cases, but future presidents as well. The timing couldn't be worse for Trump. Every appeal, every delay tactic, every procedural maneuver his team has tried has been systematically rejected by courts at every level. They've been saying no more excuses, no more delays, no more games. The judiciary has clearly had enough of Trump's approach to the legal system, and they're making that clear in the most definitive way possible. Trump's lawyers have been put on notice that their tactics are viewed as self-destructive. By making extreme arguments about unlimited presidential power, by presenting fabricated or inconsistent evidence, by burning credibility with judges, they've effectively destroyed their own case. Judges now view them with deep skepticism, and that skepticism affects every argument they make, every filing they submit, every claim they present. This loss of credibility is the cumulative effect of years of legal tactics that were designed to delay and obstruct rather than to present legitimate arguments. Each false statement, each inconsistency, each extreme position has added up to a judicial consensus that Trump's legal team simply cannot be trusted. And once judges don't trust you, you cannot win cases. They'll scrutinize everything you say, reject arguments that might have been accepted from trustworthy lawyers, and assume the worst about your motives and claims. The consequences of this credibility destruction are now becoming painfully clear. Trump's legal team is facing what can only be described as a professional catastrophe of their own making. The judge's remarks in this case are reportedly scathing, using language that goes far beyond the measured tones that courts typically employ. This isn't just a ruling that didn't go Trump's way, it's a judicial condemnation of his entire approach to the law. The warning of possible sanctions against Trump's lawyers has sent shockwaves through the legal community. We're not just talking about financial penalties here. The judge is potentially looking at disbarment proceedings and even direct criminal consequences if the misconduct was serious enough. This creates enormous pressure on every lawyer still representing Trump. They have to ask themselves whether continuing to represent him is worth the risk to their careers and potentially their freedom. When judges start talking about referring lawyers for disbarment, that's not a threat to be taken lightly. State bars investigate when judges refer lawyers for misconduct, and presenting fabricated evidence is exactly the kind of conduct that results in the loss of a law license. Some of Trump's lawyers are now facing career-ending consequences for tactics that were designed to help their client, but ended up destroying their own professional futures. The fabricated evidence that Trump's team presented apparently includes documents and testimony that turned out to be false. Maybe they claimed certain authorization existed when it didn't. Maybe they misrepresented what federal law allowed. Whatever the specific fabrications were, the judge discovered them and found that Trump's team had presented false information to the court. This is serious misconduct. This is potentially criminal, and it destroys the team's credibility in ways that cannot be repaired. Then there's the issue of inconsistent evidence. Trump's team reportedly said one thing in one filing and something different in another. Or they presented evidence that directly contradicted their own claims. This inconsistency shows either incompetence or dishonesty, neither of which is acceptable in a court of law. Either they don't know what they're arguing, or they're deliberately trying to mislead the court. Both destroy credibility and make it easier for judges to rule against them. The threat of sanctions against Trump's lawyers is the judge's way of ensuring accountability. If lawyers present false evidence or make false arguments, they face consequences. Financial penalties, public reprimands, professional sanctions, all of these punish the misconduct and deter future violations. But the possibility of disbarment is even more serious. That's loss of law license, end of legal career, everything Trump's lawyers have worked for destroyed because of their association with him. And here's where things get even worse for Trump personally. The potential for direct criminal consequences refers to the possibility that Trump himself could be prosecuted for the illegal National Guard deployment. If a court has found the deployment was illegal, prosecutors could use that finding to charge Trump with violating federal law. He could be facing new criminal exposure beyond the cases he's already dealing with. This isn't just about existing legal problems anymore. New ones are being created by these rulings. The exhaustion of delay tactics means Trump has run out of ways to postpone accountability. Courts have seen all his maneuvers, have denied all his delay requests, are forcing cases to proceed to trial and sentencing. Trump can't delay anymore. He has to face the legal process without the procedural shields he was counting on. This is a terrifying reality for someone who has built his entire legal strategy around avoiding accountability. The rejection of appeals shows even higher courts are declining to help Trump. When he appeals unfavorable rulings, appellate courts are affirming them, saying the lower courts got it right. That consistent rejection across multiple levels of the judiciary shows Trump's legal positions are fundamentally flawed. He can't blame liberal judges or activist courts anymore. The legal consensus is clear that his positions are untenable. The prospect of criminal sentencing being weeks away in multiple cases creates urgency that cannot be overstated. Trump isn't facing distant theoretical consequences. He's facing imminent sentencing in cases where he's been convicted and trials in cases where he's been indicted. All of this is happening soon. All of it creates a real possibility of jail time in the near future. The clock is ticking, and Trump's options are rapidly disappearing. The Supreme Court decisions limiting presidential immunity that contributed to this collapse include recent rulings clarifying that immunity only applies to official acts, that personal conduct and illegal conduct aren't covered. Those rulings undermined Trump's immunity defenses, made it easier for lower courts to reject his immunity claims, and created a legal environment where judges like Imrut feel empowered to rule against presidential overreach. The setbacks at the appellate level show Trump losing at every stage. District courts rule against him. He appeals. Appellate courts affirm. He tries to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denies review. That consistent pattern of losses across all levels shows his legal positions are untenable. There's no court that will save him, no judge who will accept his arguments, no justice who will grant him the immunity he claims. The ongoing congressional and criminal investigations add even more pressure. Trump faces threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Courts ruling against him, prosecutors investigating him, Congress considering actions against him. All of it creates comprehensive legal jeopardy that would be overwhelming for anyone. For Trump, who has always operated as if he were above the law, this convergence of legal threats is unprecedented. The impact on GOP strategies and political prospects refers to how these legal losses hurt Trump politically. When courts keep finding he acted illegally, when his lawyers face sanctions, when he faces sentencing, it becomes harder for Republicans to support him. It becomes harder to claim he's being persecuted when courts keep finding he broke the law. The political cover that once protected Trump is evaporating along with his legal defenses. Now we reach the bottom line. Trump's final defense has collapsed completely. Judge Imrut's ruling that the National Guard deployment was illegal, combined with the permanent injunction she issued, has stripped away Trump's claims of unchecked executive power. That core defense theory that Trump relied on across multiple cases is now destroyed. His entire legal strategy, built on the premise of unlimited presidential authority, has been exposed as legally baseless. Trump's team has committed what the judge effectively called legal suicide through extreme arguments and fabricated evidence. They've lost credibility with judges, gotten threatened with sanctions and disbarment, and now face potential criminal consequences themselves. The scathing court remarks condemning Trump's legal positions and tactics have become part of the permanent record, influencing other judges who will handle Trump's cases going forward. The warning of imminent sanctions, disbarments, and criminal consequences is creating panic among Trump's legal team. Lawyers are questioning whether representing Trump is worth the risk to their own careers and potentially their freedom. Some are likely to leave, others might flip, and all of them are watching their professional reputations being destroyed by their association with Trump. Legal observers are calling this a historic turning point. Trump's delay tactics are exhausted. His appeals have been rejected. Criminal sentencing could be weeks away in multiple cases. All of Trump's maneuvering has failed. All his attempts to postpone accountability have ended. The ruling is expected to set precedent for presidential accountability, establishing that presidential power has limits and courts will enforce those limits. The Supreme Court decisions limiting immunity have contributed to this collapse by making clear that immunity only applies to official acts, not to personal or illegal conduct. That narrow definition of immunity has undermined all of Trump's immunity defenses. The appellate setbacks show Trump losing at every level: district courts, appeals courts, Supreme Court. There's a consistent pattern of rejection across the entire judiciary. Congressional and criminal investigations are adding pressure from multiple fronts. Trump has to defend against legal threats simultaneously, and each one makes the others more difficult to handle. The impact on GOP strategies and political prospects means Trump's legal losses are making Republican support harder to maintain. When courts keep finding illegal conduct, when lawyers face sanctions, when sentencing approaches, it becomes increasingly difficult to claim persecution. The broader shakeup affects everyone around Trump. Lawyers facing professional consequences, associates facing legal jeopardy, political allies distancing themselves, all because Trump's legal defenses have collapsed. The judge, on the verge of issuing a devastating ruling, has already destroyed his final defenses. That imminent ruling is expected to open the way for criminal penalties, major civil liability, and comprehensive legal accountability. Trump's legal empire is crumbling as defenses fail, as lawyers lose credibility, as courts reject his arguments. The fabricated evidence is leading to possible career-ending consequences for attorneys. Disbarment proceedings are likely. Sanctions are certain. Some lawyers potentially face criminal charges for presenting false evidence. This marks a new phase where Trump has no viable defenses left. He has to face trials without immunity protection, has to face sentencing without delays, has to face accountability without the legal shields he was counting on. The final collapse is comprehensive. Not one defense failing, but all defenses failing. Not one case going badly, but multiple cases collapsing simultaneously. Trump's entire legal strategy has proven to be built on false premises, on claims courts won't accept, on tactics that destroy credibility rather than build it. The devastating nature of the imminent ruling is based on the judge's findings that Trump acted illegally, his team presented false evidence, and his claims of power are wrong. All of this creates a record that prosecutors can use and that other courts will rely on. It establishes Trump's misconduct as judicially determined fact. The crumbling of Trump's legal empire is visible to everyone. Cases failing, lawyers leaving or facing sanctions, appeals being rejected, sentencing approaching. All of it creates a picture of comprehensive legal collapse. This is what it looks like when all defenses fail, when tactics backfire, when credibility is destroyed, when courts unite in rejecting a defendant's arguments. Trump is now facing this reality. His final defenses have collapsed. His legal team is in disarray. His options are exhausted. There's nothing left but to face trials and sentencing, to accept accountability for illegal conduct, to experience consequences that have been building for years. The judge is set to issue a ruling that confirms all of this, that makes official what everyone can already see. Trump's legal defenses have failed. His attempt to avoid accountability has collapsed. Justice is coming whether he's ready or not. The courts have spoken with clarity and finality, and there's nothing left to do but face the consequences. Trump's long march through the legal system has reached its destination, and the verdict is devastating. As we watch this unprecedented moment in American history unfold, we're witnessing something that will define the presidency for generations to come. The principle that no one is above the law, not even the president, has been affirmed in the most definitive way possible. Trump's claims of unlimited executive authority have been exposed as the legal fiction they always were, and the consequences are now becoming real in ways that Trump never anticipated. The judge's ruling doesn't just affect Trump, it affects the presidency itself, establishing limits that future presidents will have to respect. It sends a message that the rule of law applies to everyone, regardless of how powerful they might be. And it creates a precedent that will make it harder for future presidents to claim immunity for illegal conduct. This is a watershed moment in American constitutional history. Trump's team is scrambling, trying to find some angle, some argument, some legal theory that hasn't already been rejected. But there's nothing left. The courts have seen everything, rejected everything, and are now moving toward final resolution. The days of delay are over. The time for accountability has arrived. And Trump is facing it with no defenses left, no credibility with the courts, and no way to avoid the consequences of his actions. The ruling that's about to come down will be devastating for Trump, but it will be clarifying for the country. It will show that our system of laws works, that courts will enforce limits on presidential power, and that even former presidents must answer for their conduct. This is the moment when the legal system pushes back against executive overreach in a way that will be remembered for decades. Trump's final defense has collapsed. The judge's ruling has destroyed his core arguments. His lawyers have been caught presenting false evidence. His tactics have been rejected as self-destructive. And now he faces the music without any way to avoid the consequences. This is the end of the road for Trump's legal strategy and the beginning of a new chapter in American constitutional law. The comprehensive nature of this collapse means there's no turning back. Trump can't undo the damage, can't rebuild the defenses that have been destroyed, can't restore credibility that has been lost. All he can do is watch as the legal system does what it's supposed to do, hold powerful people accountable for their actions. And that's exactly what's about to happen. Judge Imroot's ruling is the culmination of years of legal battles, years of Trump trying to avoid accountability, years of his lawyers pushing the boundaries of acceptable legal conduct. Now the reckoning has come, and it's more devastating than anyone could have predicted. Trump's legal empire has fallen, his defenses are gone, and the consequences are coming for him in ways that will reshape his future and the future of the presidency itself.